Well, welcome everyone to HPE's Webinar on Demand series, supported by Ecosystem. Through the series, we're going to be exploring everything as a cloud service and what that means to you and your organization. I'm Alan Hesketh. I'm a principal analyst with Ecosystem. I'm covering the CIO advisory and digital transformation space. Within Ecosystem, our research is showing that there are a number of characteristics about New Zealand specifically, that over 90% of organisations in New Zealand they've had to change their digital transformation as a result of COVID-19. That means you've either started or stopped or significantly changed what digital transformation actually meant to you. One of the clear things that's coming through is that the biggest single business priority for organisations now is customer experience. That's come through very clearly as the number one priority for New Zealand organisations. And backing up that is the continued use of collaboration tools and platforms that we've all had to adopt as part of that impact from COVID-19. And all of these, in one way or another, actually use that kind of cloud platform. So joining me today through this series is Trisha Rozas, who's a strategy and business and tech executive with HPE. Welcome, Trisha. I understand you've been in New Zealand for a relatively short time. What brought you here?
Yeah, thank you so much. You can tell by my accent that I'm not a native Kiwi, that's for sure. I joined Cloud Technology Partners in 2016, and then we were acquired by HPE in 2017. And one of the lovely benefits of being acquired by this global company was a message went out and said, hey, who wants to go to New Zealand to lead this large healthcare cloud transformation project in New Zealand? And I raised my hand and I said, absolutely, sign me up. So myself, my husband, our dog, we came over in January 2019 from New York, where I'm originally from, and we've been leading this project we started to lead it for 18 months. And then last August, I moved up to Auckland, New Zealand, where I've been based, and I'm working for a partner that is really starting to grow their cloud services business, and I'll be working with them through the end of this year. So that's a bit about my background. I run a strategic account team, so we really get involved with the large enterprise transformation engagements for our clients. And then prior to joining Cloud Technology Partners, I was CIO for a number of firms in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area. I spent a couple of years at Deloitte, really getting my management consulting chops. Spent 8 years at AIG, which is certainly well known from the All Blacks here, yes. And have a couple of software startups under my belt that didn't quite make me all the cha-ching I had hoped for. So I'm looking forward to speaking to everybody today. Thank you.
Well, welcome to New Zealand. It's great to have you here. So let's get into the questions. Trisha, there are many interpretations of what cloud is. Could you share with us your perspectives on cloud?
Yeah, absolutely, Alan. I think just from a basic level, computing services that are provided by another party, a third party, and you'll probably hear the big ones out there, public cloud providers, Amazon, Microsoft, Google. But at HPE, we think about it in the context of a hybrid cloud environment, because not all our clients are ready to just leap over to public cloud. So we have this concept of a private cloud that we can stand up for you. So it's your own cloud, you manage, but again, you get the benefits of the pay-as-you-go OpEx model that the public cloud provides. We also have a concept of a multi-cloud, right? So you may have some of your applications that run on-prem. They might run in this private cloud that I talked about, and they may also run on any of these public cloud providers. And at HPE, we work with our clients to figure out what is the best platform for the applications that you have in-house. Some are ready to go to public cloud. They have the modern architectures and will help you migrate there. And some maybe not quite ready. They have data gravity issues, for example. They need to be close to the client. So those are some of the issues that we'll help you work with when you're thinking about which cloud platform is best for you.
So just expanding on those a bit more, I mean, what do you see as the key differences to the traditional on-prem approach that so many of our organizations are actually used to?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that these cloud environments, these cloud platforms are getting so much traction is that it really, think about it as a pay-as-you-go model, kind of like your electricity, right? You're only going to pay for the services that you need and that you use. And honestly, they get shut down at 5 o'clock onwards if you don't need them and you don't have to pay for them. They get shut down on weekends. And this is super powerful for those applications that have testing environments, that have other environments that you don't need to be running all the time. The other really great thing about them is if you have a seasonal business, right, in the summer months, you may have to plan for high demand, but in the old model, you had to buy all the hardware to really meet that high level of demand. So this allows you to flex based on your business needs. And I'll give you an example. I had a client, a big pharmaceutical client in the United States, and they needed to do a clinical trial, and they came up to IT and they said, we need to run this clinical trial, millions and millions of data that they needed to pump through. And the IT department said, that's going to take 40 servers, and we can't get those up for you in the weekend. So they pivoted and they went to public cloud. They got them up, used them over the weekend, ran the clinical trial, and shut them down again. So really a lot of benefits around the pay-as-you-go operating model as we talk about it.
Yeah, I was working with a legal software company at one stage, and our monthly billing run was very, very heavy processing, but it was only used 3 days a week.
Right, exactly. Right.
So quite literally, we ramped it up for those 3 days a week.
Yeah, I was going to say I was working for an insurance company, and at the month end, which was high peak season because everyone was trying to get their policies processed, the systems would crawl to a halt. And if we had the public cloud, we could have, even managed the demand for that last week every month that we needed. So there's a lot of great uses for this pay-as-you-go model.
Yeah. So expanding a bit on what you talk about in terms of that pay-as-you-go is, how do you see those economics of the cloud actually being different from the traditional on-prem model? How does it change the way you account and cost these services?
Well, the big change is really thinking about your capital expenditures are now going to be a software as a service. You'll be paying that monthly, and you won't have this idea of a big capital investment up front that you can amortize over X number of years. And there's quite a bit of flexibility when you can control that capital model. You can plan for it, your monthly expenses. So you really have to think about what is the discipline from a finance perspective that you're going to build into your operating model when you're starting to use cloud platforms. And you've got to have the right tools in place to monitor the ongoing activity on a regular basis. And there's just a lot of great software out there that will say, hey, I'm going to set it at this threshold. If it goes above, it's going to send an alarm, and it's going to alarm the right people across the organization so that you can act on it quickly. But you will have to think about a number of implications, and I'm thinking tax implications. You've got to get out to your businesses because it impacts their P&L. So all of that kind of setting up front around what is the change going to be across the organization going from CapEx to OpEx is, again, something that we can help with, and we've got a lot of ideas around it. But get in front of that before you just start launching on all the technology and start moving things to cloud.
Yeah, and your hybrid cloud approach that HPE supports, so with kind of you can support all the different cloud providers. Do you hide that complexity from your HPE clients?
Well, we have I'll say the standard, it depends, but we can definitely do that. But sometimes our clients don't want to hide that, and they want to have the control. So we can give that to you as well. But we have a service where we'll take your infrastructure that's on-prem and we'll run it for you, and we'll bill it back to you in an OpEx model. So you may not want to go through a hardware refresh, right? Well, we can help with that. And on the public cloud environment, it's the same idea. You've got some great tools out there. It gives you as much transparency as you want. And there's also has to start thinking about from a finance perspective, well, now I have the transparency to know exactly how much an application costs for a particular line of business. And how am I going to charge that back out, not charge that back out? So how do you start to think about having that level of detail that you don't necessarily get when you've got a big data center or you've got a big server farm, for example, because that really gets into allocation methodologies, and sometimes not everybody across the business thinks those allocation methodologies are fair. So this gives you the actual transparency. Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember a lot of people I worked with felt that the target was to have them equally unfair to everybody. A bit earlier, you talked about
I was going to say
that
we call it
ability
peanut butter
to
approach too, just spread it to everybody, and that causes its own challenges. So absolutely.
it does. It just gets sticky and messy. Okay. You talked a bit earlier about that ability to flexibly change the resources you're using. So can you expand a bit on kind of the value of agility that you see being delivered?
Think about, you can put in the automation that you can build out in these cloud environments and say, I want to shut down these environments at a particular time. And you have the ability to control that. So sometimes you might get developers who want to come in and you can give them access and say, I just want them to be able to have access 24/7, for example, because they're doing a particular project. But it really does provide that ability for your production environments, for example, could be 24/7 because you've got client-facing applications, you've got clients coming in, buying things, transacting. You want that on all the time. But maybe your training environments or your development environments, all those other ways that you go about deploying the software, I don't want them to cost so much. So you might choose a different pay model. They may not be the high grade compute and storage, for example. They may be a little slower because you don't need the same access with clients. So there's a lot of, again, flexibility in this model that you can use with your private cloud as well as with your public cloud. The other flexibility is it allows you to provision whatever you might need and set these parameters all via a console, a software model. So you don't have folks that are having to walk into data centers, spend time doing that. So the idea is that you get some savings from that you can redeploy, that you can share across the organization. So there's a lot of savings just from the agility of what you'll be able to get by using the software rather than having to have a person manually walk into a data center and rack and stack servers or pull them out or whatever that may be.
Yeah, I remember running in companies where we were running our own on-prem hardware, and we had to size it for the maximum load that we expected. The thing I love about this model is you can turn a lot of stuff off.
Yeah, exactly.
When it's not needed.
Another question I was going to ask Alan, just to share with you, another question that we hear a lot from our clients is, what is the typical savings that people get when they start to move to public cloud? And I'm talking around specifically public cloud, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. Mm-hmm. And we typically see, and we also have this information by industry, but typically see about a 30% savings across IT. And that savings can be, again, redeployed into other projects that you may have, can be deployed across the business, but that's on average what we see in terms of savings.
What sort of looking at the focus for, or the challenge for the finance team, how do you think moving into this kind of environment, what are the challenges the finance team is likely to face in implementing this?
Yeah, in addition to the sort of thinking ahead about the OpEx changes, right? When you think about, a lot of times we'll walk in and, no offense to IT, but finance is an afterthought. And that in this new model cannot be that way. You've got to have somebody from your finance team who is involved in the journey towards public cloud, towards private cloud right up front, because there is going to be an impact to this OpEx model. And again, have them help you figure out, there's a process called naming and tagging of every single resource across your cloud environments. Have finance involved in that. Do you want that to go down to the line of business level? Do you want it at a company level? Do you want it to go down to an application name? So we get the finance team involved up front so they can help understand how they want to allocate out those costs down to a minutia level and then set it up in the platform so that they have that measure and monitor across the environment. So again, really important to get those folks right up front engaged in your transformation program.
Yeah, it sounds like those kind of cross-functional teams are going to be critical in the implementation. What other tactics have you seen achieve early value?
Yeah, we have a model or a framework that really encompasses, as you described, this cross-functional governance model. And I don't want to say, sometimes you say governance and people get, oh, I don't want another committee. This is actually a decision-making, right? Decision-making body that has folks across the organization, including HR, because how do you start thinking about skills? How do you start thinking about a comms plan to people in legal and vendor partner. How do you start dealing with this ecosystem of different vendors that you're going to have? And again, this is where you got to put your finance hat on, right? Because it's not just the public cloud costs, but you're going to need new tools. You're going to need different skills and staff, and that all gets boiled into, or should get boiled into, a business case, so you'll understand the whole cost. And security and risk and compliance is an area. Customer service. How are you going to handle incoming service requests? Are they going to be handled and go to a team that you already have? Are they going to be rerouted to a different cloud team? So all of those kinds of things you want to think through, and they definitely have an impact on the overall program cost.
Trisha, thanks for your time today. Really appreciate your insights. Today, we've been talking about how HP sees everything as a service offering, and how this can help organizations both manage their costs better and provide better agility to support their customers and employees. This is the first in a series of webinars that we're going to be releasing, with our next episode covering the type of experiences that organizations would encounter during their cloud journey. Thanks for spending time with us today.